Good afternoon. This is the Var Torah on Parashat Shemos. It is the second book, Shemos, and this is the first portion, the second book of the Bible, Chumash. And it opens with the description of Yosef saying how old Yosef lived to. Until he saw to the fourth generation. Then he and all of his brothers died. Then that whole generation that comes down with Yaakov died, 70 people. And then they say that a new Pharaoh arose in Egypt who did not know Yosef. What it meant is that either there was a new Pharaoh who set aside and didn't care about the way Yosef rescued Egypt and gave incredible power to Pharaoh, and or that it was the old king who, for his own purposes, decided to ignore and forget about it, as we often see in history. This happened over and over again. And why was the sudden change? Because until the end of that generation, the Jews had stayed in Goshen, stayed out of the way of the Egyptians with their learning Torah. Once that generation died, they started assimilating with them, and Pharaoh was worried that they could combine with a foreign invader and basically overthrow him. So he made him subject to harsh slavery and building two cities and with very hard labor, that and very many other types. And then his astrologers told him that there was a baby boy who was going to be born who was going to overthrow his rule. Now, the Egyptian astrologers weren't too precise. So what happened was he first called two Jewish midwives, Shifra and Pua, who in reality were Yocheved and Miriam, and told them to kill all the Jewish boys. They defied the rule. Hashem protected them. In any event, once that failed, Pharaoh ordered the drowning of all boys, Egyptian and Jewish. Now, the Jewish boys miraculously, it sounded tragic, were saved. Hashem miraculously transported them to the desert where they were raised by angels. Next scene is Moshe grows up in the meantime, and he goes out one day to see the depression of his fellow Jews, and what happens is he sees an Egyptian mercifully beating a Jewish slave. Moshe looks around and kills him. We'll be getting back to that incident. And the next day he realizes his murder he committed has been known. He flees Egypt and eventually winds up in Midian, where he saves Ethro's sheep. He's the local ruler because the daughters were the shepherdesses were attacked by the other shepherds because they were left to water their sheep last. Moshe overcame that. He then marries Sipporah, one of the daughters of Ethro, and he then is called summons by Hashem 40 years later at Har Sinai. Why was he that far away from Yithro's location? Is because he didn't want to take any chance of having his sheep eat from anybody else's land. He was summoned. Shem made a burning bush. There was an angel within it, but the tree didn't get consumed by the fire. The angel spoke to Moshe and then told Moshe, Hashem through the angel told Moshe that he was going to send him to tell Pharaoh to send the people out and that he was going to liberate him. Moshe gets into a week-long argument because he was the most modest of men. That was one of the reasons he was chosen from this. And finally, Hashem commands him to go. He gets the permission of Yethro, goes to Egypt where he meets Aaron. He shows the signs to the 70 elders, and they go to Pharaoh. Pharaoh, of course, refuses and says, I do not know Hashem. I do not know, in other words, God as a creative force who made the universe, and I don't know him as anybody who rules. I'm not sending the children, I'm sending the Bnei Israel free. And then to retaliate, he decides, okay, they're starting to get rebellious. Until then, they had to make bricks and build the cities, but they were given a straw, and now they had to search for the straw. And when they didn't, they were beaten more. And the people get mad at Moshe. It ends with Moshe asking God, why did you send me? You made it worse, which was a thing he shouldn't have said. It was quite chutzpahdik. And on next week's parsha, we'll explain the consequences of that. Short and long term, it was arrogant on his part. And that is how the parsha ends. Now, what I would like to speak about is the incident of Moshe killing the Egyptian, him winding up with Yethro. What is the significance of that? Now, just before I do, to understand the Chumash, in fact, any words of Torah, the 5 books of Moses, there are 4 basic levels on which it can be understood. One is called Bashat, the simple meaning. Second is Remes, things that are alluded to but not immediately obvious. Third is Drash, where they're taking the words of the pasuk, the verse, they use it for other purposes. And the fourth is Sod, the more hidden, deeper meanings. Now, to truly understand a verse, it's been stated that one has to understand all 4 levels. And even with that, even at any one of those levels, there are different interpretations of meanings. They're not contradictory, unlike the modern Western world, where we try to have one simple solution, one right answer. It's not the case with Torah, which is different. And even with secular knowledge, even today, we're seeing, especially in the natural sciences, when we start getting into quantum mechanics and other theories, not everything is as precise, and there are many possibilities and permutations. Now, any book written by a human, it can be open to a few interpretations. The author may have had a few meanings. The books, the writings of Hashem are infinite, have numerous meanings. And as I said, every word of Torah has 70 meanings. But beyond that, we have 2 levels. Now, to look at the story simply, the Chumash, Moshe went, he killed this Egyptian who had been with a Jewish woman because he tricked her into believing it was her husband who had come back from working in the fields. And in addition to his cruelty, now Moshe looked around, saw it meant he looked forward and backwards to his ancestors and to Dmitri's descendants. Not one worthwhile relative, and therefore he killed him using the name of Hashem. Then he goes on, he flees, he meets Yethro, who is going to be a very important figure in our history. And when we get to Parshas Yethro, I'm going to describe this in a lot more detail. And he's then given one of the daughters, Sipporah, as a wife. Now, on a simple level, historically, we see how much impact all this made. In fact, Yithro helped set up, told Moshe how to set up the system of administration and justice for the people after the Torah was given. Now that's on a basic level. Now I'd like to give this on a more deeper level, what some people will call sod, to fully understand the story that's going on. We have to look. It starts many generations before, at the generation of Cain and Abel, Cain and Hevel, the two brothers. Now the story is well known. Cain rose up and killed Hevel, and for which he was severely punished. However, there's much more to the story. If you see, why was Cain on the ground? Because Hevel had struck him. Why did he strike him? Because he wanted one of Cain's sisters in marriage. Cain refused. Hevel knocked him down. Cain got mad, rose up and killed him. Now, that was the original story. Now, let's go to the generation of Moshe. In the generation of Moshe, as it said when he was born, he filled the room with light, because, as his mother Yocheved saw, because he was pure goodness, pure holiness. Now, that was Hevel. He was a Gilgal, a reincarnation of Hevel. Now, who was Cain? Cain in that generation was actually three people. This part of the Dvar Torah is based on both Shar Gugulim, the Chida, who was a famous Rav in the late 1700s and 1800s, and Rabbi Menachem Azariah the Fano of Italy. He lived, not as well known, he lived from 1548 to 1620, same time as the Arizal. They never met because the Arizal was in Egypt, and his final couple of years was in Svat in Israel. But he learned from one of his Talmidim, the Arizal. In any event, what is going on here? The first one was the Mitzri. That's where Cain reincarnated into. Now, who was this Mitzri? This was the one who beat the Egyptian, the Jewish slave, and had been with the woman. Now, that was Mida Keneged Mida, just like Cain, just punishment. Cain had killed Hevel, and here Hevel's reincarnation through Moshe gets to kill Cain. Now, who was Yithro? Yithro is the second Gilgal of Cain, and just like Cain refused to give one of his sisters in marriage, to make up for that, he had to give one of his daughters, who was Zipporah. Now, who was Zipporah? Was she just, this is the first time around? No. She was that sister of Cain, who got reincarnated. So Hevel couldn't get her as Hevel. He got her as Moshe. And therefore, that brought that into balance. Now, the question was, what happened to Zipporah? In Parshas Beshalach, I'm going to go down in much more detail, because she, and I'll explain it then, she eventually reincarnated and became Deborah. And so we see that these are multi-generational. Now, there was a third Gilgal of Cain, which had the really nasty parts of Cain, the ones that the Mitzri didn't get. And who was that? That was Korach, who was a cousin of Moshe, and who was later going to say at the beginning of that parsha, Korach lekach. What did he take? He took all the bad parts of Cain's neshama. So we see, for which he paid a major price. we see here that Hashem's ways are very deep, are very multi-generational, and it says in Psalm 92, Ma gedola maisecha Hashem ma'od amuko, ma'shevechecha. How great your works, O Lord, your thoughts are very deep, and that is something we should keep in mind today and the current events that are going on as we speak. And remember that it's all part of Hashem's master plan, even if we don't see it, all the reasons behind it, and may Hashem show us great chesed in this coming year, and may everything work out well, including the release of all the hostages. Good Shabbos and Shabbat Shalom.